while I think those aspects cannot certainly be ignored, I do think that given the projection of 11%, the potential for upside is greater than some downside risks. I don't think any time ever you can rule out downside risk completely, but in terms of just putting weight, I would say that the upside potential is greater.
You also, in the press conference also, I asked you about vaccine hesitancy, and that seems to be a concern, even though we have seen as many as 25 to 26 lakh people being inoculated, frontline workers being inoculated so far. But there has been a lot of talk about one of the two vaccines that has been cleared, even though now ICMR has said that they are, clearing the phase 3 trials as well. I want to understand from you, do you believe that vaccine hesitancy could be a big downside risk going forward?
No, I think as I responded to your earlier question as well, I do not think it's a large downside risk for two reasons. One, if you look at a lot of the recovery that has happened in the the V-shaped recovery, the manufacturing sector has contributed significantly to that. The service sector is affected far more by, and even within the service sector, if you look at the PMI indices that have actually grown, they've grown despite the contact-based service sectors like tourism, some of those continuing to be impacted because of the pandemic. So on both counts, if you look at, I don't think the manufacturing sector will get impacted by the vaccination, one way or the other. The only sectors that actually do get influenced are these contact-based service sectors, where if you focus on the fact that there is a large amount of vaccination happening, and at some stage also, and this is again epidemiological research shows that the herd immunity that comes in also can actually lead to the possibility of increase in cases going down. So I think when you put all these together, I think that's what leads me to believe that the downside risks are not as large as the upside potential is.
You also spoke about counter-cyclical fiscal policies. Seems to be the need of the hour. However, have warned that one should not be irresponsible during these times. I want to understand from you, does it mean we are in for a range? This is something that the 15th Finance Commission has also, the chairman of the 15th Finance Commission, N.K. Singh, has also spoken about. And I'll tell you where I'm coming from. In terms of the inflation targeting framework as well, we have a range, and that allows us to be a little more flexible. Perhaps is that what you're pointing towards?
So in that chapter on fiscal policy, there's a box at the end which looks at the at one particular country's example of a fiscal rule that enables counter-cyclical fiscal policy. So the basic point that is being made is that when you have counter-cyclical fiscal policy, the cycles that happen in an economy, those get dampened. If your fiscal policy is pro-cyclical, those exacerbate those cycles, and therefore a lot more volatility in the economy, and private agents therefore respond to such uncertainty. But when for fiscal policy is counter-cyclical, those cycles are actually mitigated, and which then reduces uncertainty, and private agents then respond to the same as well. So I would actually the idea of counter-cyclical fiscal policy is more nuanced than just a range, is what I would actually submit.
Has had some impact on assets, etc. We have quite correctly provided liquidity and other forbearance of various kinds, keeping the IBC off, not registering NPAs, etc. Quite correct, because that is part of the cushion phase. Now, at some point in time, we'll open things up. Economy, hopefully, by that time comes back with some momentum. At that time, at some point, we do need a reassessment of what the realistic position of the assets are. It is very important. And this has to be done in the context of a previous experience in this, in where perhaps we did not pay enough attention to this and kept the liquidity sort of taps on for way too long. Led to overlending, and it did leave us with many of the problems we then had to face with the earlier round of AQRs. All we are saying is, do not wait for several years before you do this. I'm not saying this has to be done tomorrow, but at some reasonable judgment has to be taken at some point, not too distant future.
The government has taken a very piecemeal approach with respect to the recapitalization of banks. Will we see a one-stock short, capital infusion with respect to PSU
That is a
banks?
judgment that has not yet been made, but as I said, we argue that you take upfront whatever needs to be done and do it quickly. And we have improved many things. The Indian banking system today, in terms of regulation, supervision, and all kinds of other things, risk assessment, etc., is not where we were in 2010.
Right.
So there is no question that things are much more transparent, much more responsible
Right.
than they used to be. We now have the insolvency and bankruptcy system, which is clearly better at getting rid of bad assets. So this is a machinery that is far superior to what it was a decade ago. Now, given that this is the machinery you have, I think what you now need, and that AQR is basically, now you need a good map. So now that you've got a better car, you need a better map.
The upcoming budget will have to do two things, which is first, it will have to tackle the current crisis and at the same time doing it with an eye on the future, which is putting in place the necessary reforms that are needed to accelerate the recovery and put India on a faster growth trend. Now, what exactly would that be? So firstly, if you look at the social sector, I think for now, there is a good argument to extend some of the pandemic support measures that were provided, which were lifelines to poor households, that in kind and in cash, that expired in 2020.
It has to prioritize spending, which means focus on what is essential. And I would start with relief to the poorer households and ensure that there is adequate relief to the small and medium enterprises. But then move on to how do you get the economy back on track? And clearly, one of the best ways the government has of getting the economy back on track is, doing the spending on infrastructure.